I'm Christopher Lydon in Beijing, paying a house call on the world-famous artist in opposition, the dauntless Democrat Ai Weiwei. His wary sort of humor and his warmth show up on the way into his walled garden. At the gate, his bicycle basket is full of fresh flowers. They're his greeting every morning to the government spies who mined him, the spies who took my picture on the way out. Inside, as we started our conversation, at the great table in his busy studio, I had to ask him. May I ask, are we alone? Is your friend here from the government?
I don't think so. I think we are alone, but I don't know what are they listening. I have no idea. I should say I'm very monitored or watched.
But you seem to have friends all over the street. We met two of your assistants on the way before coming into your garden. It's such a beautiful spot, but this seems to be the Ai Weiwei precinct of Beijing.
We have been like this for years, and since I built my studio in 1999, this spot, Caochangdi, has become really a focus point in terms of design, architecture, and art, and also internet activities. So we always laughing call it, this is Caochangdi is a liberation zone, yeah. Until one day I was taken up from the airport and had 81 days of secret detention, and that day, same day I was taken away. There's hundreds of police made a big ride to this house. They occupied every street and take photos of all the cars parked nearby, and the hundreds come into my house and did a very deep search.
Not perhaps since Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Soviet Gulag has there been a dissenting artist who got to be as famous as the government that hounds him. But Ai Weiwei's situation is one of a kind. He's a celebrity. He's the virtual mayor of an industrial district in Beijing that has become a thriving village of modern painters, sculptors, art galleries. In official China, Ai Weiwei is a scare word, a non-person. At the same time, he's a popular icon of opposition, what Solzhenitsyn called a second government. Ai Weiwei has mastered what people say is a very Chinese use of paradox and contradiction. He refers to his own testing of the limits as a kind of performance art. He sees himself, we discovered, as a Chinese patriot. Remember, he was a star consultant in the design of the Bird's Nest Stadium built for the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And his devotion to Chinese wit, Chinese ways of doing things, and understanding of life kept popping into his conversation. And still, his words were unforgiving, really scathing about the Communist Party dictatorship, no matter that it is rebuilding China's infrastructure and making millions of Chinese people rich. As we spoke in Beijing this summer, Ai Weiwei had a big show on at the Brooklyn Art Museum of conceptual art, idea-driven sculpture, and multimedia. Everybody knows he wasn't allowed to go to New York for the opening, but he said it didn't bother him that much.
I'm an individual. I'm an artist in China. For past 3-4 years, I didn't even travel. I can't travel. So I think maybe because this kind of act really, from the authority made me become quite well known, and I realized that even I walk in the park, I will see young people come up and say, "Hey, can we take a photo?" Or "We're your supporters," or we're a sympathizer of your act. It's quite surprising how popular they made me become.
I wish we were in the Brooklyn Art Museum today. The United States, New York loves that show, and I do too. And yet they won't let you see it.
Well, New York is kind of like my town. I spent over 10 years there, and I love New York. So when I know my travel show is going to end up in there. I'm kind of nervous, It's kind of you meet your lover or something, It's kind of nervous. So I'm very happy when the show turned out to be all right. And I don't have a chance to go, but that's fine. The show is made for audience, and its work is there, and has been taking professional care there by Brooklyn Museum, and their writers write a very beautiful article about it. I'm very grateful for them.
When the children stop you in the park, what is it they see? What is it they want to support and identify with?
I think today China, after 30 years of fast developing, and of course young people, the new generation, they're born in the 80s or late 70s, 80s or 90s, they're really in a very different world than its government, I should say. So they're much more liberal, open, and they're much better informed. Even all the major internet, still under very strong being censored in China. But still, I think the information is much spread than before. So then you can see people have different channels and has some space to make their own choice or decisions. Mm-hmm. So that is very hopeful. Actually, you see the resistance of the power, for change, and you see the young generation. They automatically belong to a new world, and so I see hope and possibilities there.
What has opened them up, do you think?
I think basically in two senses. First, they are living a more contemporary world, the material life, the exchange between people, and the new technology and all those things really affect their life. They are actually, if they want to challenge, they want to meet the challenge, or they want to have a better development in their personal life, emotion, or career, or even just communication, they have to adapt the new technology. And that is such a natural act. And another sense, in past decades, annually China have 100,000 youngsters to study outside United States and Europe. And those people are, of course, they are elite of a group, because they have to have some background, either economy or even belong to elite society. So they study outside. They have to make their own judgment. They have their own experience, and they're better educated or better informed, at least. So I think those people are continuously going to make a strong impact in Chinese future.
So something is working in their favor.
Well, yes, I'm working in their favor. Yes.
I want to, as we say, push back a little bit on your case. In sense, I came from Shanghai on the train yesterday, and I was looking out the window for 6 hours, and I was thinking, something is working here. It's a beautiful picture out those windows of the order in those farms, the greenhouses, the plastic greenhouses, the people in tractors, and some of them out weeding alone. It looked like an old Chinese painting in many scenes along that way. But in general, also the technology of the train and the investment in that infrastructure is huge, and people are enjoying it. Not evenly yet, but something good is happening there. And I wanted to say, do you know how good this country looks from the train?
Yes, I often take the train. Even I notice I've been followed in train stations and hotel lobbies, but nobody can can ignore. This China has been going through a really fast developing, and made a lot of progress. And of course, it's a very powerful state, and I don't see any state in this planet can make such a dramatic change. And this is there's some kind of credit there, and. But when we talk about change, there's several things we have to mention. To whom this change is made for. I mean, what kind of society and what kind of people we are preparing this for,
Yeah.
and how this change has been made, and at what cost. So those things has to be actually should be discussed. It's much more complicated, of course, for a traveler or people from outside of China would be so impressed. And I'm also often very impressed, to see the road, the energy of build a new city or a new town, and such a miracle. Kind of, it doesn't look very real. It's kind of like a surreal.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was thinking, wouldn't this government be good for Egypt? I would love to see the Chinese model, or some of it, in many parts of the world, including Iraq, including parts of India.
Well, yes, many people made this kind of comparison to Brazil, India, or Egypt, or many. The world is so problematic. But I cannot focus on that, because this is, I can focus on my understanding of our own history, or as Chinese, our own culture, right or wrong, or better or worse. Those things we can talk about. I think you can buy everything, you can build everything, but how you build a human spirit, how you build, how you make young people feel hope and have energy, have imagination and creativity. Those things I really think a lot and worried about, because those are human inner structures.
Right about here in our conversation, Ai Weiwei's distress about China started to remind me of parallel anxieties in the U.S. An American in China for the first time sees a lot of our faults exaggerated, maybe. We have our own pretty narrow and unpopular elite, our own money politics, almost a one-party state. The Chinese would call it a dynasty of Bushes and Clintons. We have a lot of the same complaints about an overbuilt and underperforming higher education system. We have the same worries about culture losing out to commerce and advertising. Ai Weiwei said, well, the bad traits of big states begin to converge, but there are big differences too, he said. He cited one by name, Edward Snowden, the exiled American leaker of security secrets.
Yeah, I think all the powers, somehow they become alike, all the authorities, U.S. or China. But what we shouldn't forget is U.S. still produce individuals like Snowden. You still have a very strong individuals, independent mind and the independent act. I think those are very, very important for any society to protect individual rights and to protect freedom of speech. In some circumstances, you don't put people who just have different ideas in jail, and it's like you kill best part of your society.
Yes.
You don't put writers, poets, or musicians. You don't limit their expressions because you are simply suiciding by doing that. So as an artist, I have my responsibility to speak out for my rights or our rights. Most artists don't do so. There's only a few artists, maybe.
This is true. The United States produces a Snowden, but China produces an Ai Weiwei and Yu Hua and other outspoken individual people, and we're here to celebrate them.
It's very little. It's in today's world, those people become singled out and become such a very weak voice, actually. But still, we need those voices to be there. It's not about me. It's really about independent criticism. I think that should always be there, should be encouraged, or at least I don't think any society would encourage that, but at least not to be diminished.
Yes, but let's praise God that you have not been discouraged. You're thriving in your own city, in your own country, and the world is watching and listening and loving your work too.
Well, maybe in some sense, I'm a lucky one, but we have one life. You just have to think how you spend it. You don't get more when you die. I mean, this is all we need, and our voice, our expressions, and our way to communicate, to share ideas, and maybe to help others.
Now I want to hear you talk about the state of China, the moral state of China, the emotional state of China, the spiritual, philosophical. Where are we?
I think if we talk about those topics, I think we come back to the called ground zero, and I think most after 100 years of revolution and all kind of class struggle, what they destroy the most is the foundation of this culture. And I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just a fact. The foundation of this culture has been destroyed. The philosophy, the so-called the moral and the aesthetics, completely destroyed many times, and continuously. Those things are not to encourage to have any meaningful discussion, and there's no profound ideas or even a sound argument we can relate to. So that's pretty modern. You have such empty volume in China. Anything goes. Empty space, which in China is such a large society, have a long history and such a complexity there, but it's totally a vacuum space. Which but with very strong sense of control and censor. So it's quite a strange stage we are in.
That strange surrealism of China today led to a litany of qualities that Ai Weiwei loves about his country. I had asked him about the Chinese gift for breaking rules, for thinking outside the box, for double thinking, even under communism.
Yeah, that's the culture. I mean, Chinese are quite intelligent or witty in create their own liberal space, within some kind of even very extreme conditions. Even they just have very small possibilities, they still can grow and still can achieve some kind of happiness or some kind of confidence and there. So that maybe made Chinese culture very different from others.
Let me ask you.
It's hard to imagine, but China is a society with great potential. I should say, people. Still, I think the tradition, the culture still works in even when we say the basic structure is destroyed, but the understanding of human life or their relations with outside or relations between the people, they still have a very strong Chinese way or Chinese characteristic characters. So I think they're very practical, I should say, and they love freedom and they like variations to have their own decision or definition about their life. So it's quite rich in those aspects. For me, I think it can be a wonderful society with some justice. We need a little bit justice. We need a little bit of fairness in the whole game. China has never believed we can have a perfect system, but basic social justice, basic rights, to provide people. Not to make people disappear when they have different ideas. It's not asking too much, this. And maybe in some circumstance, people need to vote. The voting is not just a game. It's make people feel they're involved, feel individuals are important for the society, feel they can bear some responsibility. Otherwise, nobody bear responsibility because you never even been asked. So when those rights being applied or through the practice, of course, they always can have some kind of different meaning and result.
Ai Weiwei, the nature connection is pretty dark, even out the window of the train. I mean, the thing that worried me most was those endless high-rises, which have detached people from the land, but also from each other. That looks to me like a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. It's you see people, the balance of the human effort, the human act, and the natural response. And so you see, for different reasons, they build the roads, they build the structures. Every act which involves very heavy corruption, those corruption really become like a bait for investment. Those are big issues. It's not a human structure. It's a structure really represent, the dictating power. That only reflects the interests of the people who's in control.
Let's talk more about almost a century of one revolution after another in China, starting, I suppose, back in the 30s and the war years, the National Liberation War, won by the communists, the Civil War, the Great Leap Forward, the industrial effort, the Cultural Revolution, and now the market revolution. Yu Hua says it's all one thing, that China is sort of addicted to revolutions, and that there's a great deal of the Cultural Revolution spirit and drive in this capitalist revolution, that all of them have in common a few men at the top. There's a great deal of violence in all of these revolutions, including the bulldozer violence of the redevelopment revolution, and that they're all completely propagandistic. They're driven by bullhorns and TV advertising and big character posters. They smother us in propaganda. Do you believe that it's a one sort of continuous manipulation of a few people?
Yes, I think Yu Hua is absolutely right. I think basically the understanding of society is never changed, and it's almost like Northern Korea today. China was so poor in the 60s and 70s, and then they understand if they can loosen up in that part, maybe China can survive. When China survives, the communist also survives. They're always on top of it. And it worked well. That once again proved Chinese culture have very strong potential. But the bottom line is to make a firm control. To maintain the power. So today, maybe even facing all kind of problems, still they think still it's a very powerful state.
I wonder, though, if that's fair even to the present moment. Again, I'm riding on the train, but walking around Shanghai and now Beijing, it seems to me we say this is an engineer's state, but they are doing things, they are getting results, they're investing vast amounts of money in technology that has to serve millions and millions of people. They're putting vast amounts of money into education. They're making it tough for independent voices for sure, but this does look to me like a kind of top-down social revolution. And people are getting real benefits out of it. Better diet, maybe better opportunities to work in the end, but certainly modern education.
Well, that's your picture. And
it's my wild guess, but my challenge a little bit to you.
I don't see that as a challenge if we not to say what is the bottom line with the whole development. We have a healthy society. I mean, we have a meaningful beliefs or something we think we are working together for a nation which really become a better society. Those things can never even be discussed. Chairman Mao, they always use the same, painted this beautiful picture for people, said, if there's no communist, there's no new China. This is their slogan. And then now even West believe in that. This is typical bullshit. What's the new China? What is new China? What are they talking about? They see people as slavery, modern slavery, or they see people.
Yes, they live by slogans, even brainwashing, and you feel it in Shanghai, in the malls.
Shanghai is the worst of the society model, the worst.
Explain.
Because they really love all the material life of the West. They just worships any material life, but they refuse to talk about anything which has any. They don't build any critical mind. This is such a corrupt society. They just follows communist step every moment, even in the worst moment. When Sirenbang, which is Chairman Mao's gods, or they always so-called leftist. They're the one trying to make China most controlled, and doesn't have any liberal thinking. When I have a show in Shanghai just 2 months ago, which I'm just part of a group show, and that show is about to show some historical aspect in the 1990s, which I involved as a jury for some kind of China Contemporary Art Awards. 20 minutes before the show, the police and the so-called culture officials come to the Shanghai Contemporary Art Museum, force them to take down my names from the wall. Even the museum official says, this is history, how can we do it? They say, has to be done, the work has to be removed, the name has to be erased, so they have to use hairdressers to dry the wall to make, 20 minutes before the show. So that's kind of mentality. They have to destroy my studio. They will invite me to build a studio for some kind of culture promotion, but then they just completely, those are liars. This really shameless liars, and but their existence give a perfect example how this society works. You can be a shameless liar to survive and to polish yourself as a modern society.
If Louis Vuitton can have his name on the wall, why can't you? If Prada can be all over the walls of Shanghai, why not you?
Well, I really don't know. I think that's their last chance for celebration before any revolution. That's a sign for revolution.
The Vuitton bag.
Yeah, if every lady just carries Vuitton's bag but cannot mention my name, think about it.
Shanghai is the worst of it. Speak of those two cities that you know very well, Shanghai and New York. You thrived in New York in a semi-underground mode, but it was still the financial capital of the universe. Why can't Shanghai leave a creative space, a celebrated, open space for artists like you? And will it eventually?
Never. Shanghai will never be a capital for any kind of creativity. It's just impossible for those people. This kind of mentality, they just kind of people just want to take advantage of a modern world. They try to steal everything from the contemporary brain effort, which is made by Western civilization in the effort of 100 years. And they just kind of steal it. They think they can buy it, but they cannot touch the spirit of very common, essential values such as human rights, such as freedom of speech, and such as independent mind. How can a society live like that?
Ai Weiwei, would you speak about those values, family values in China especially, social values, abstract philosophical Confucian values? What are the essentials that are in great danger now?
The great danger of China, if we talk about society, is no sense of trust. If you don't have a power which can have legitimate rights, to control, any power in the family, in the any kind of institution or as a nation or in the world, so-called world order. And if the power is not legitimate, then you don't trust your people, which you rules and you controls. And how can you face in yourself, look at their eyes, and to tell them what to do, and to tell them you're best for them? They will never work together. They always just trying to benefit themselves, and they don't work as a society. So you see, even our most profited communist officials, they will send their children outside. Of course, they don't trust it. They know exactly what they're doing. They don't trust what they're saying in the meetings, when they talk to people. They don't trust it's not something they believe, and they have to say it. It's by order. It's like military. So the rich people, they just have to shift their money to a safer banking system or another space, because they don't trust the whole structure here. And even the poor people, even the people who work for me, they always ask, how can we send our children outside? Can you write a recommendation for us? I said, yes. It's such amazing phenomenon now. Everybody want to move out.
What is happening to the Chinese family, which used to be the foundation of everything?
I think if there's a disaster, that is the worst area, is called the family. Because literally, all Chinese families in the city has moved in the past 10 years. It's almost none of them are not. So they all moved into a new neighborhood, which they can never have a memory where they have come from. The neighbors, they will never talk to each other. They don't know who are they. They don't have young friends when they have a school is. They don't have a street corner where they had played when they are small. Chinese basically is family-oriented culture. Through family it nurtures all kind of moral and social structures, and that is completely destroyed. I don't know how it's going to work. It's going to be getting worse. You may have fast trains, beautiful buildings, a road, but who's going to work on it? Maybe it's good for tourists. I have so many people work for me. They are from countryside. They contribute their life. They do worse job in construction the city. The city is not constructed by most citizens in Beijing. It's constructed by people, migrants from elsewhere, anywhere. They have to come to Beijing, and they only go back to their home once every year to see their children or to see their parents. And in here, they face the most dangerous jobs. It's modern slave. They have no any kind of protection if they get ill or injured. And the working hours is terrible. And the working conditions mostly just poisoning. You cannot accept it. You cannot even see it. You cannot walk into it. But where is their future? Besides, they can send back money to their children. They will never see it. In 10 years, they may only see 10 times. And they have to grow up without parenthood. And their children, if they want to move them to Beijing, where they spend their life to work, their child cannot have a school here. You call it a pretty picture. I mean, this is just modern slavery.
Next time I come to China, I want to visit a prison if I can. But you were
in prison. You don't have to visit the prison.
I'm sorry?
Just try to make it easy. You can become a prisoner.
You be locked up, you mean?
Yeah, lock up for maybe 15 days or then you know what prison is like.
You've been there. What is it like?
Prisons basically it's the same almost everywhere. It's just some are more luxury, some are less. In Chinese prison, like my lawyer, who's in prison now, he has to be locked up with another 20 person in a room, which is it's very crowded. And the prison all have their own rules that all those rules just want to break your will and to make you feel you're vulnerable and you're not protected. And actually, in certain society, the prison just want to show you how unlawful they can be. So you're scared. You don't trust you're protected. You don't trust your rights. You only thing you feel is vulnerability. You think I'm not protected. They're ruthless. Ruthless is such an important feeling for certain society. To show you. It's like a beast next to you. Why you're so scared? Because it doesn't really speak same language. You cannot communicate.
Xi Jinping has a China dream. Nobody knows what he means. What's your China dream?
Actually, I don't have much dreams. It's I think we all have to deal with realities, and the reality is pretty harsh. So that's my case.
You encourage a lot of people. I want to say inspire a lot of people. I think everywhere to stand your ground, be yourself. Say what you mean.
Yeah, I think those are not political or principles, but rather we have to respect life. Life is a miracle, and life it's only once, and we have to respect it.
Amen. Ai Weiwei, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that was my moment with the great man. He regretted as we left that maybe he sounded like a jerk or just a complainer and critic. We should have talked about food or sex, he said, but now it was time for him to get to work. The surprise to me in the aftermath was that two idealistic young Chinese people who had come with me and hung on every word from Ai Weiwei said he wasn't really speaking to their lives or their world. The young woman, a college sophomore, said that her feet would have been bound in the pre-revolutionary China of, say, 100 years ago that Ai Weiwei seemed to pine for. She'd have been married off in a commercial transaction, not a chance of testing her way into higher education, as she and her parents, in fact, did. The young man, a visionary high school teacher in Beijing, thought that Ai Weiwei's many dust-ups with Chinese police, and Lord knows he didn't ask for them, had made him cynical, almost blind to the big picture. Not so long ago, the young teacher said, China was occupied by the colonial powers. In material terms, China has made greater strides in 30 years than, say, Brazil or India in education, in clean water, in access to a better life. In this pragmatic, highly engineered Chinese society, the young teacher said, something is working. And what did I take away? Mainly gratitude to this brave man for his stubborn, almost fearless attachment to the soul questions. He's reminding all of us what it means to stand out as an individual and for a society to stay free, alive, creative, human. As that young teacher and school reformer said to me, Ai Weiwei has nightmares around those questions, which I was thinking apply just as sharply to Americans as to Chinese. And for this, we have to say thank you. Thank you, Ai Weiwei. There were more conversation with Chinese artists, writers, and many others on our website, radioopensource.org. I'm Christopher Leighton. Thank you for being part of the Open Source Podcast Project.